Orphan boy approaches police and says 3 words. He instantly calls for backup. In a quiet neighborhood, a young orphan boy named Ethan was known for wandering the streets, keeping to himself and never asking for help. He had lost both his parents in a tragic accident and was left with no family, no home, and no place to turn. But one evening, everything changed. Ethan approached a police officer, Officer Jack Thompson, who was patrolling the area. The officer had seen the boy many times before, but he had never spoken to him until this particular evening. Ethan stopped in front of Officer Thompson and said just 3 words. "Help me, please." It wasn't the words themselves that shocked Officer Thompson. It was the urgency in Ethan's eyes and the desperate tone in his voice. The officer knew something was wrong, but he had no idea what he was about to uncover. What could possibly make a young boy, who had always kept to himself, seek help so suddenly? And why did those 3 words cause Officer Thompson to call for backup immediately? Officer Jack Thompson had worked in the same precinct for over a decade. He had seen his fair share of strange situations, but nothing prepared him for the encounter with Ethan. As he sat in his patrol car, he saw the boy slowly walking toward him. Ethan's clothes were worn and tattered, and his face seemed older than his years. He had been living in the area for months, but he rarely spoke to anyone. "Hey there, Ethan," Officer Thompson greeted him, rolling down his window. Ethan looked up, and for the first time their eyes met. The boy didn't smile. Instead, he appeared nervous, glancing around as if he feared someone might be watching. It was an unusual reaction, but Officer Thompson thought little of it, until Ethan opened his mouth. "Help me, please," Ethan said softly. The words struck Officer Thompson like a cold wave. There was something about the boy's voice, a mixture of fear and urgency, that sent a chill down his spine. The officer immediately felt a sense of duty. But what could an orphan boy living alone need help with? "All right, take a seat in the car. What's going on?" Officer Thompson asked, trying to keep his tone calm. But his instincts told him this wasn't a simple case. Ethan hesitated for a moment before speaking again. It's about my uncle." "Your uncle?" Officer Thompson repeated, a bit confused. He knew Ethan's parents had died in the accident months ago, and there was no mention of an uncle in the boy's file. The boy nodded, eyes wide with fear. He's been watching me. He hurt me." Officer Thompson's mind raced. He had never heard anything about Ethan's uncle before, but this was no time to ask questions. The boy was clearly scared, and it wasn't the kind of fear that came from being an orphan. This was something darker, something sinister. "Where is he, Ethan? Where's your uncle now?" Officer Thompson asked, his voice becoming more serious. "He's close," the boy whispered. "He's always watching me, waiting for me to mess up." The officer's heart sank. If what Ethan was saying was true, this wasn't just a case of an abandoned child. It was something far more dangerous. The mention of an uncle brought up red flags, as it was unheard of for family members to cause harm to a child in such a way. Was Ethan's uncle the one who had been threatening him? Or worse, was he the one who had been causing the boy harm in the past? Officer Thompson glanced around, taking note of the dimly lit street and the empty houses nearby. He had no idea how close Ethan's uncle could be, but he wasn't taking any chances. "I'm going to call for backup," Officer Thompson said, reaching for his radio. He wasn't about to take any risks, especially with a young boy in danger. The fear in Ethan's eyes told him everything he needed to know. Something was terribly wrong. Before he could finish his sentence, a flash of movement caught his eye. A figure standing across the street watching them. The figure quickly disappeared behind a tree as if trying to stay hidden. The officer's pulse quickened. He wasn't imagining things. There was someone out there and they were watching him. "Stay in the car, Ethan," Officer Thompson ordered, his voice firm. "Don't move." He immediately called for backup, knowing that whatever was happening, he needed more eyes on the situation. Ethan's uncle wasn't just a distant family member. He was a threat, and Officer Thompson had to act fast. Within minutes, the backup arrived, and Officer Thompson, along with his colleagues, started to secure the area. They spread out, looking for the figure Ethan had seen, but there was no sign of anyone. Then, just as Officer Thompson was about to radio in his location, something unexpected happened. A familiar voice called out from the shadows, "I've been waiting for you, Officer Thompson." The voice was deep, gravelly, and unmistakable. It was a voice the officer knew all too well. Turning sharply, Officer Thompson's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing in front of him was a man he had known for years, the very man who had been causing Ethan so much fear. His uncle. But it wasn't just any man, it was Thomas Grant, the local businessman. Thomas had a history with the police, but nothing serious. He had always been known as a successful, respected member of the community. But there was something sinister about the way he was standing now, his cold, calculating eyes locked onto the officer. You're Ethan's uncle?" Officer Thompson asked, his voice barely a whisper. Thomas smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "You didn't think an orphan boy like him would be left to fend for himself, did you? No, he's part of something much bigger than you realize." Before Officer Thompson could react, Thomas lunged toward him, but his colleagues were ready. They tackled him to the ground and quickly restrained him, preventing him from escaping. Ethan, still sitting in the patrol car, watched in disbelief. For the first time in his life, he felt safe. His uncle, the man who had been tormenting him, was finally caught. But what was the truth behind Thomas's sinister plans? And what had he been hiding all these years? After Thomas was arrested, the investigation into his actions revealed a dark truth. It turned out that Thomas had been secretly controlling Ethan's life, manipulating him into doing things he didn't want to do. Thomas had used his power and influence to intimidate Ethan into silence. The truth was, Thomas had been responsible for much of the boy's pain and fear. As the case unfolded, more victims came forward, revealing that Thomas had used his wealth and status to hide his criminal activities. But Ethan, despite everything, was brave enough to speak up, and it was his courage that brought everything to light. The community was shaken. No one had ever suspected Thomas, the beloved businessman, of being capable of such horrors. But through the strength of one young boy's voice, justice was served. Ethan was placed into a new, loving foster home, where he began to heal from the trauma he had endured. His story inspired many, and Officer Thompson was hailed as a hero for his quick thinking and for protecting Ethan when he needed it most. As for Thomas, he faced charges that would change his life forever. He could no longer hide behind his wealth and status. The truth had come to light, and justice would prevail. The story of Ethan and Officer Thompson serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of speaking up when something isn't right. Even when the world seems dark and the people we trust betray us, there is always hope. Ethan's courage to seek help from the police officer was the turning point in his life, and without Officer Thompson's quick response, the truth might have never come to light. This story also sheds light on the importance of listening to those who are vulnerable, especially children, who may not have the strength to speak for themselves. We are reminded that no matter how much power or influence a person has, justice will always prevail when the truth is uncovered. The people who choose to protect others, even in the most dangerous situations, are the real heroes. In the end, this is a story about resilience, courage, and the power of standing up for what is right, even when it feels like no one is watching. Ethan's bravery, along with Officer Thompson's swift action, proves that sometimes the smallest voice can make the biggest difference.